have my perfectly imperfect cup to remind everyone to be perfectly imperfect. You are perfectly imperfect.
Welcome to Rose City's Room to Bloom. It's our online space for petite presentations and conversation. And as I said earlier, I'm Mary Maleka. I'm Executive Director of Rose City Center. If you're not familiar with Rose City, visit our website, rosecitycenter.org, to learn more about the organization. Today's topic is how to overcome imposter syndrome, presented by Dr. Nina Savelle-Rocklin. Dr. Nina is a psychoanalyst, podcast host, and author of the best-selling book, The Binge Cure: 7 Steps to Outsmart Emotional Eating. She also wrote Food for Thought, Perspectives on Eating Disorders. There they are. And she co-edited Beyond the Primal Addiction, Food Matters, and the upcoming Eyes, Mind, and Vision. Her latest podcasts, Mind Matters and The Forking Truth, unlock the secrets of our minds to elevate lives from the inside out. She is thrilled to be a board member of Rose City Center, and we are thrilled to have her on the board. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you so much. It is great to be here. So I am just going to dive in and tell you about my client, Beth, who had lost 89 pounds, and she was thrilled because she had spent her entire adult life trying and failing to lose weight. She went on diet programs, she went on cleanses, she went to the gym. Nothing worked until finally, in our work together, success. And she felt like her life was finally going to begin, and that is when the nightmares started. She had the same dream, or the same kind of dream, every night. And she saw these huge numerical dates on a giant screen, like an old-fashioned newsreel, like, October 29th, January 3rd, December 19th. And they would start back and they would just get bigger and bigger and bigger and go towards her. And just as they were about to crush her, she would wake up totally freaked out. So on the surface, this did not seem like the scariest nightmare. Like, there were no killers, there were no zombies, there were no giant snakes, which would be my personal nightmare. They were just calendar dates. And those dreams turned out to be a very big deal because they were not random images, they were clues. And they held the key to a powerful, powerful transformation in Beth's life. And what was behind those dreams is exactly the same kind of hidden force that sits behind imposter syndrome. And what is imposter syndrome? Well, you could be the most capable person in the world and still feel like at any moment someone is going to discover that you are not who they think you are. That fear, that is the essence of imposter syndrome. And it has also affected some of the most successful people in the world, including my favorite, Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou once said, "I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I have run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out." Well, if someone as accomplished as Maya Angelou can feel that way, it tells us something really important, which is that these feelings are not cured by more achievement. And people try to cope with this inner sense of being a fraud in all kinds of ways. Some become perfectionists, some overwork, some chase validation, some compare themselves to everybody else. Am I good enough? Am I as good as that person? I'm not. I must not be good enough. Some avoid challenges and visibility altogether. And many believe the same thing. They believe this: they need to change themselves, work harder, say the right things, do something different, be perfect, whatever perfect is. And that is completely wrong because imposter syndrome is not actually the main problem. It is a problem. Of course it is. It hurts people's careers, it hurts their relationships, it makes their life miserable. But the deeper problem is what causes imposter syndrome in the first place. And that's where Beth's nightmares come in. So let's go back to those strange dates on the screen. And remember that dreams, Why are dreams so weird? Dreams are the halfway point between the part of you that wants to keep something hidden and the part of you that wants to know. And that's why dreams are so disguised and so weird. So Beth was talking about the scary calendar dates, and I had my psychoanalytic aha moment because remember what was happening in Beth's life. She'd lost all this weight. She was ready to move on with her life. She was ready to meet someone, get married, have kids, which is why she signed up for a dating app. A dating app. The dates in her dreams, they were calendar dates, but they represented romantic dates. So consciously, she was all in. She wanted to date. She was excited, but unconsciously, she was terrified. So in her dreams, the dates were scary because they meant on some level she thought if she started dating, she'd be overwhelmed. And where would she get this idea? The answer where it always is, the past. She grew up with a mom who sacrificed everything to become a wife and a mother, who her mom really lost herself in those roles, so never had an identity of her own. So the message that Beth got, the message she absorbed, was that love, marriage, and family meant losing yourself. So unconsciously, Beth equated relationships with a loss of self. And that's why she was afraid of dating. So we challenged that belief. Her nightmares stopped. She started dating. Now, she changed her life by uncovering the hidden influences that had been affecting her life. And that's how we overcome imposter syndrome, too. So let's take a look at where these hidden influences, AKA the unconscious mind, comes from. And think about what messages did you receive growing up about success, failure, self-worth? Did you grow up feeling that you had to achieve in order to be loved or valued? Were you in an environment where your accomplishments were praised, but your failures were never accepted, were never seen as stepping stones to growth? For example, Alex, by all external measures, he was a highly successful entrepreneur and he had built a really thriving career, but internally, he constantly felt like he did not belong at the table. And that's what he would always say. I don't really belong at this table. They're going to figure it out. Why? Because Alex grew up in a family where love and approval were tied directly to performance. If he did not come home with perfect grades as a child or top honors, he was overlooked. He felt invisible. It was, why aren't you doing better? Why aren't you doing more? If he got an A, it was, why didn't you get an A plus? Nothing was ever good enough. And so that pattern followed into adulthood because he had internalized it and he believed it. So if he wasn't succeeding on the level of Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, in his mind, he was just not good enough. So obviously, from that perspective, nobody is good enough except Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. And he was constantly, Alex was constantly feeling like he was an imposter and people would find him out. So think back to your own experiences growing up. What expectations were placed on you? How did they shape your sense of worth, your sense of self-worth? So for Alex, again, the message was you're only valuable if you do perfectly. You only matter if you are achieving at the highest level every single time. So as an adult, no matter how much success he achieved, he always felt like he was falling short. He didn't believe he deserved his success because deep down, he was still chasing that unattainable standard of perfection, which is why, of course, I like to say be perfectly imperfect, right? That's the way to live life, not if you struggle with imposter syndrome. So as you can see, from the time you're very young, your mind is forming templates about how the world works, and it's registering what happens when you make a mistake. Whether love feels steady, unconditional, or conditional. What it means to belong in your family. Because by the way, if you don't feel like you belong in your family, your first group, it's really hard to feel like you belong in the world. And what it means to be good enough, whatever that is. And those early experiences, they don't just become stories you remember, they become patterns you live out because you believe them. So you walk into a meeting or you meet someone new and you feel anxious for no reason, or so it seems. Or you get praised and you immediately think, I fooled them. Or you get an opportunity and your first instinct is to say no. So on the surface, it looks like a simple present day problem. I'm too anxious. I need to be more confident. I need to stop being such a perfectionist. But from a deeper perspective, a psychodynamic, psychoanalytic perspective, something else is happening. In our psyche, authority figures often represent parents. So if you grew up with a critical parent, you might walk into a performance review already braced for criticism, even if you know intellectually and rationally your boss is supportive and not critical. If you had to compete for attention in your family, a colleague's success can feel like sibling rivalry all over again. If you grew up with constant judgment, your challenge may be to build a kinder inner voice and to surround yourself with people who can relate to you in a supportive way. If you learned that love had to be earned through achievement, your work may be to practice being valued for who you are, not what you do. If, like Beth, you watch someone lose themselves in a relationship, your work may be to cultivate relationships that include boundaries and a stronger sense of self. And when you understand these hidden influences on you from the past, you stop reacting automatically, and then you can start choosing consciously. So that is how imposter syndrome stops impacting your life when you are making more conscious choice, when you understand how the past has affected your present. And it is very powerful to realize what's been holding you back. But what do you do with all of this? It's great information, but how do you actually create change? Because insight and understanding is just the beginning. I really object to Oprah's aha moment because she made it sound like you just went, aha, I see it, I get it, it's all so clear to me now, and then everything would just fall into place. Of course, not the case. Healing happens through action. So I want to give you a couple of practical tools that you can use right away. So recently, a patient told herself, "You are such an idiot," because she forgot to return an email at work. And many of us talk to ourselves this way in the second person voice. We say to ourselves, "Oh, you messed that up. You're going to fail. They're not going to like you." And often that you voice belongs to someone in the past, a parent, a teacher, a coach, a friend, even. We hear it so often that we internalize it in our mind and we start using it on ourselves. Internalization or sometimes introjection, depending. But I asked her to repeat that sentence in that first person. So in other words, instead of "you're such an idiot," to say "I'm such an idiot." And she was like, she stopped. She couldn't do it because she said, "Oh, it just sounds too harsh." And that is exactly right. Using you, that second person pronoun, lets that inner critic speak without us realizing whose voice it is. So switching to I makes it very clear how unkind it is. Often we speak to ourselves in ways that we would never speak to somebody else. So here is the exercise. Catch the you. When you notice yourself thinking, "Oh, you're going to blow this," or "Oh, you're so stupid," or you can't get anything right," or something like that, shift it to I, or try to shift it to I because it's going to be hard. Say the exact same sentence with I instead of you, even if it's only in your mind. So then ask, whose voice is this? Does it sound like a parent, a teacher, a coach, a former boss, someone I knew who spoke to me this way? A grandparent? And if it's like, no, nobody ever spoke to you this way, there are two reasons why we create these critical voices. One is we internalize a voice that is spoken to us. The other is things are just sort of too loose and there's not enough structure in in our worlds, and children need structure to feel safe. So if things are too loosey-goosey, children create that critical voice to give themselves a sense of being held and safe and structured. Only that critical voice, of course, is usually way too harsh. So just really look at, well, where does this voice come from? And then ask yourself, what would I say to a friend? If a friend forgot to return an email, would you say, what is wrong with you? You are such an idiot. I can't believe you forgot that email. You might say, okay, you made a mistake. It happens. What can you learn from this? No big deal, whatever. So you deserve to be just as reasonable with yourself. And this is one step to interrupt old patterns and learn new ways of responding to yourself. And by the way, the woman who called herself such an idiot for forgetting to respond to an email. She was an upper management corporate professional who had been steadily promoted during her 18 years at the same company. And yet she still was ready to feel like an idiot, and she still felt like a complete imposter. And at the end of our conversation, she happened to mention, like, oh, almost like an afterthought. She's like, oh, you know, and I had just gotten this award at work, but whatever, that didn't mean anything. It's like, wait, what? An award? Say what? So she had filtered out the award and focused on the one missed email. And in psychology, that is called confirmation bias. We hold a story about ourselves and the world. I'm a fraud. I just got lucky. I can't do anything right. I screw up all the time. And then our mind seizes on anything that fits the story and it dismisses anything that doesn't. Okay. And that brings me to the second tool, which is taking ownership of your accomplishments in a way that actually focuses on who you are, not just what you did. So another patient, she created something she called her validation list. She said, oh, my validation list. And every time something went right, big or small, she wrote it down. And that in itself, that was powerful. When her imposter story kicked in and she thought, oh, I'm terrible. People think I'm incompetent or whatever the story was. She could look at that concrete list of things that she had actually done and the feedback that she had actually received, which was good. But I wanted her to go one step further. So I asked her to write down not just the accomplishment, but also what qualities in her did it take to make that accomplishment happen. So you can apply this to your own life. If you get a promotion, that might take perseverance, strategic thinking, the ability to manage conflict, intelligence, knowledge, emotional intelligence. If you lead a successful project, that takes creativity, resilience, the willingness to ask for help, the ability to learn quickly. And this is definitely different from generic positive thinking. So you're not writing, I'm amazing. You're writing, I solved that difficult problem. That shows perseverance. I stayed with that hard conversation instead of avoiding it. That shows courage. I pulled people together who don't usually collaborate. That shows leadership. And when you do this over time, you build a record not just of what you achieved, but of the qualities about you that helped you make it happen. Because imposter syndrome is a false idea about who you are. And this exercise helps you see that who you are includes all the things, right? Persistence, intelligence, creativity, responsibility, courage, whatever is true for you. So keep a running list, whether it's on paper or in your phone, and someplace you'll actually use it and you can add to it. So when something goes well, just, write it down and add at least one quality so that when the imposter syndrome voice says you're a fraud, you have something to look at and say, no, nope, this is who I am, and really read it. Imposter syndrome is the result of beliefs, some conscious, some unconscious, that were formed early in your life. It's like you're being haunted by the ghosts of the past. And the idea is to become a ghostbuster and recognize how you're being haunted, challenge those thoughts, and change them. I like to call myself not just a ghostbuster, but a detective of the mind. By uncovering these hidden influences over us, we can really live our lives from a place of freedom rather than from fear, because you stop feeling like an imposter when you uncover the hidden influences that shaped you and you heal them. It's true at work, it's true in your relationships, it's true in the way you talk to yourself when no one is listening. So I want to close with a little help from the artist Michelangelo, who was once asked, how did he turn those great blocks of stone into statues? And he said, and I love this so much, he said he didn't turn the stone into statues, he freed the statues from the stone. So you don't have to become somebody else to be good enough. You just have to chip away at what is keeping you stuck so the person you already are deep in there can be free. Your authentic self can be free. So if you struggle with imposter syndrome, I encourage you to be curious, ask questions, and get support. And by the way, there is a lot of support at Rose City Center. So if you're in California, be sure to reach out because they can help you. Because when you understand what's behind the feelings of imposter syndrome and heal, you can step into your life with true, lasting confidence.
Thank you very much, Nina. We'll open it up for any questions or comments or anything you want to share that relates to the topic.
Don't be shy, ask me anything.
I know we have a lot of Rose City's clinicians with us today. Did anything that Nina talked about remind you of any situations you've encountered?
Hi, Nina. My name is Tony.
Hi, Tony.
Hi. You had mentioned, though there will be clients who had, parents who were, um, critical of them or whatever, and that often can lead to an imposter syndrome. And I had made a note, what about the parents that are too easygoing? And then, of course, later on, 10 minutes later, you said, if the parents are too loosey-goosey, then you can have somebody who sort of makes up their own critical um, messages. So I just,
Mhm.
I don't really have anything other than that, but just to say, normally it's the first one that you think of, people that are so critical. I'm not good enough no matter what I do. But there are others who just internally, they don't feel good enough. Maybe they didn't have, the foundation of structure or whatever.
Well, uh, uh, Donald Winnicott, since there's a lot of clinicians here, I mean, obviously I did this talk for not clinicians, but for just, people who struggle with imposter syndrome. But Donald Winnicott talked about the moral defense, which is when children are treated badly, whether, you know, intentionally or not, treated, have a bad experience, kids don't say, oh, what is wrong with my parents? They are treating me badly. They say, what's wrong with me? Because it would be too untenable to realize that you have parents that are unreliable and that can't protect you or that don't understand you or treat you badly. So children say, what's wrong with me? They take the responsibility upon themselves. What's wrong with me that's causing these people who must know me because they're my parents and our parents are our first gods to treat me this way? And that can also become the idea of there's something wrong with me, which for the purpose of this talk, I didn't go into that, but that's another reason that creates that sense of imposter syndrome. I must be bad because I'm being treated badly. So later on, when people think I'm good, don't they realize I'm not? You know?
I'm also thinking about how in modern society, right, we're so inundated with the voice of media and social media, and how that could even be what informs this critical voice, right?
And this cultural idea of perfection, whatever that is. I mean, did we not all see the Barbie movie? And hasn't it been put to rest that there is no such thing as perfection? And if there were, it would be boring. But that idea of perfection as that which you aspire to, so you're always going to fall short. And with social media, that idea of perfection is pervasive. I remember being at a friend's house and she and her husband were bickering. And she was one of those people, or is still, she's still one of those people that has to put everything she does in her life on social media. And they were arguing, and all of a sudden she said, "Oh wait, we need a picture of our dinner party." So they took a picture and posted it, and there's this perfect looking picture. And if you looked at it, you'd think, "Oh my gosh, these people live amazing lives. They live in this beautiful house. They have all these friends over." And yet little did anyone seeing it know that before that they'd been like that. So we're exposed to these ideas and these ideals that are impossible to live up to. And comparison is the thief of joy, right?
I have a question for you, Nina.
Mhm.
How did this become a topic that you speak about?
Well, as you know, I specialize in eating disorders, primarily binge eating disorder and bulimia. But that's just a symptom that comes that's the weed, right? The roots are many and varied, but something I see a lot is perfectionism and its counterpart, imposter syndrome. And so, recognizing what leads people to certain behaviors when you feel terrible about yourself and you can't be with yourself if you feel like you're essentially not good enough, it's hard to be with yourself. Well, certain behaviors, whether it's turning to food or beyond the primal addiction, we talked about all the addictions, right? They're all coping strategies. And so I'm always interested in, and all my books deal with not the symptom of, and my work deals with not just the symptom of whatever anyone is doing with food, but why. And those are the hidden influences or the weed and the root, however you want to talk about it. Um, and I see this a lot of like people who are just so brilliant and so bright and so accomplished. I mean, really accomplished, who no matter what do not feel good about themselves, and often may for people who come to me think that, well, the solution is sometimes it's to uh, be at a certain weight or stop, change their relationship with food, be at a certain weight, then they'll be good enough. Because our culture, by the way, tells us we will be good enough when we reach a certain weight, right? Like that's the diet industry right there, $60 billion industry predicated on telling us that if we look a certain way, we'll have perfect lives and be good enough. And that's why Beth, by the way, didn't want to date until, not her real name, obviously, what didn't want to date until she lost weight. I mean, she could have dated at any time. She's a lovely person. She could have found a person, married and whatever. But she thought she had to be, this is her conscious mind. She was unaware of her unconscious fears, but she thought she had to look a certain way before she could even sign up for a dating app. And that's so pervasive of, you're going to be good enough if you look a certain way, which is a tragedy in our culture. We have so many more things to think about than what we're eating or what we weigh, and it keeps people small in their thoughts. And it keeps people from feeling, I'll get off the soapbox in a second, keeps people from feeling good enough about themselves as they are.
Such an interesting answer because there are so many things that go hand in hand. How did you end up, I'm not sure of this, but I'm guessing you didn't set out knowing what you'd end up like focusing on and specializing in.
I sure did.
You did? You did?
I I absolutely did because uh, I was the poster child for eating disorders from the time I was 5 years old till I went to college. And I would go in a loop, restricting and dieting and being on these crazy diets, and eventually like all willpower was lost, binging and purging, restricting, and I went in this cycle like this for a long time. And I finally went to therapy in college, but I went for anxiety because I was too mortified to tell the truth, not even to my therapist. I was just nobody could know the truth. So I didn't tell her. And yet I by the time I left therapy, all my eating disorders were gone for good. And people were like, "Wait, what? How do you get over all eating disorders without ever talking about food?" And I said, because that's when I realized it wasn't about food. It was what was eating at me. It was why I was turning to food or turning away from it. And in therapy, I learned that I was a perfectionist. I learned I did feel like an imposter syndrome, like somehow I fooled people. Oh, and my mother once actually told me, people who I babysat really liked me, and she's like, "Oh, well, you fooled them." So I got it. I got it honestly. Oh, right. There's a reason we're all therapists, right? Or no, maybe not all of us here, but so that's when I realized, and I had also been told at a very young age, you know, be quiet. You're too loud. You're too emotional. You're too much was the message that my little 5-year-old mind got from my very academic college professor parents. And so being a 5-year-old and being very concrete, right? That's dichotomous thinking in 5-year-olds. I took that as there's too much of me on some level. Maybe if I were smaller, I would be good enough. And so that compared, along with my experience in therapy, made me realize, oh, it's not what I thought. And there are so many people out there who think they have no willpower, they have no control, they think they're addicted. I got to do something about this. And so when I started as a therapist almost 25 years ago, so long ago that I was the first person I knew to have a website, and I was told, "Oh, that's so bold. Like, you can't have a website and you can't specialize in eating disorders. And my God, you cannot say that you had an eating disorder on your website." And I said, "Well, I am going to say it, is people have to trust me. And if they have a feeling about it, grist for the mill, whatever, we'll talk about it." And I'm still a blank screen they can project on. So I have specialized in all of those years. Since I was a trainee where I saw all kinds of people, but I have only seen people who struggle with food, with one exception, but her daughter had an eating disorder. But that's just the symptom, right? That's just the weed. Everyone comes in with a different root, and that's what makes it, you know, interesting. Like, we're gonna do some emotional gardening and figure out what are the roots to this behavior. Let's figure it out for yourself. Let's solve the mystery. I'm mixing metaphors, but there you go. And that's what I love about my work. And it's so helpful to look at those to discover those hidden reasons for why people do things that are not in their best interest, or why they don't do things that they want to do.
Well,
It's great to hear your story, Nina. And I think, if anybody else wants to share their own story, we all come where we are in the world at a specific time with, our past, our experience, and, all that. So it's great to hear your story.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to share my story, because I think especially the people that I work with, my very first group as an intern for people with binge eating, I write about this in my book, is I walked into this room and this woman looked me up and down and said, "So what does a skinny bitch like you know about binge eating disorder?" You know? And when I told my story, I just was like, "Oh, I'm not doing anything I prepared. We're having a different conversation." Um, People feel, at least in dealing with eating disorders, people feel like I can understand them, and I'm not, you have to have lived it and know what it feels like. And for people to know that I know that is very comforting, I think. It's why analysts have to do analysis. You got to know what it's like to be on the couch as well as in the chair.
Well, Dr. Nina, I think I want to throw my hat into the ring because I do appreciate your presentation and you have touched on a couple of things, and I guess I will ask you this question, which could be a little broad. So if I do need to add context, let me know. But based on your take, how do you feel cognitive dissonance plays a role in this process, especially if a client does or does not have the ability or clarity to see themselves authentically, going back to your quote around chipping away to the authentic self?
Well, I never try to tell people that they're great. If someone says, I'm an imposter, I've fooled everybody, I'll say, what's wrong with you? What, how have you fooled people? Let me hear it. Like what's so terrible? How have you fooled, are you fooling me? You know? And just get more into what it is that they think. Right? Because people know what they know and they feel as they feel, and those things are. So I never try to be supportive and say, but let's look at like in clinical work. I would never go to the, hey, but let's look at your, the things you do well and what it says about you at that point. That's that's for the purposes of this talk. But I would say, oh, you think you're a fraud? Tell me how. How are you a fraud? Where did you first come to believe this? And what if you are? What does that mean? We just get more into that rather than fight their beliefs.
That's what you would have had to do with me, Nina, because I would just roll my eyes if you said back that like, no, no, you're wonderful, you're terrific. You're well, no, like I wouldn't. Then I would fight even
Yeah,
harder, and I'd trust your judgment less.
right. And I'll tell people like you know, you're showing me you're nice, bright, fabulous, thoughtful, on time, courteous self. I want to know the you that you keep behind the curtain. Like I see the great and powerful Oz, but I'm more interested in the person behind the curtain. What what's going to happen if I find out you're just a mess? You know? But that's what you've got to get into. Like what's so awful? Because again, stepping away from this 20-minute talk, right? People have to be able to feel like they're we, not people, we need to feel like our messy, icky, not good enough sides are still lovable. Like, but we don't have to be perfect to be lovable, that we can be just our authentic self, which is a range of different things. We could be mad, we can be messy, we could be angry, we could be hateful, we could be whatever, and that's okay.
Just about out of time. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? I just want to thank everyone for joining us, and thank you, Nina. It's really interesting, as I said, to hear your story and to think about this a bit. And I'm sure for the clinicians who are present, it might have triggered some thoughts in terms of working with your patients. But we appreciate everyone joining us, and stay tuned. We'll announce our next Room to Bloom session in the future Rose City News.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.